Scientific data, tabling, graphing, analyzing the data. Whenever data is collected, it needs to be presented in a meaningful way so that others can see it, understand it, and make sense of it. Data can often be presented in a table or a graph. Sometimes it's even presented in a chart format. This is a way of organizing all of our information so that it is able to be understood. Data tables are a great way to organize the information so that other people can understand what your results are. Graphs are going to be pictorial diagrams that represent numerical data. It is important for you to be able to master these skills. As a student, you must be able to interpret and read graphs, construct data tables, and be able to construct different types of graphs, like line graphs, bar graphs, and circle or pie graphs. And to be able to think critically and problem solve. You really need to be able to look at these graphs, charts, tables, and be able to analyze them and understand what is being said. So, we're going to begin by practicing a little bit with interpreting a graph. In your notes, you will also see this image of a graph. Look at the graph and answer the questions in your notes, numbers 1 to 10, using the graph that you see on this slide. It is also included in your notes. This graph shows the effect of different concentrations of fertilizer on 3 different types of plants: corn, oak seedlings, and rose bushes. Let's take a look at bar graphs and try to analyze some bar graphs. Study the bar graph to the right and see if you can answer the following questions. Do fish grow larger in weight in pond water or in tap water? The answer is that they grow larger in pond water. Which grow larger, the males or the females? The females grow larger in both cases. What is the average weight of female fish when grown in pond water? Your answer would be about 6.4 grams. Using the bar graph, see if you can continue to answer the questions. What is the average weight of the male fish when grown in tap water? Why do you suppose the fish grow best in pond water? Record your answers in your notes. Making a data table. Scientists collect data. It is necessary to record our data in an organized fashion. Anytime data is collected in an experiment, it is most often presented in a table. This is an example of a table. The data table must have a title, rows, columns, and heads. The title should be placed at the top to tell the observer what information is contained in the table. In this case, effects of temperature on different enzymes. At the top of each column should be a head that tells you what information is in the column. Temperature, enzyme 1, enzyme 2, enzyme 3. it's going to be your turn to make a data table for the following information. Use the following information collected for the growth of a plant and complete the data table that is in your notes. Remember, in the top row, place the title of your data. In the next row, place the 2 column heads, and then in the following rows, fill in the data. In example 2, you're going to use the same process to make a data table for the following information. You are going to make an information for the number of crickets that was recorded on 2 different nights at various temperatures. Remember, in your data table, the top row needs a title. The next row in the 2 column heads need to be information about what is in the columns. Since data was obtained on 2 different nights, you will need 4 columns. In the remaining rows, fill out your data. A line graph. Line graphs show the data plotted as points and are connected by a line. Line graphs are often used to show changes over time and can be used to compare 2 or more sets of data. Before a line graph can be constructed, you must identify the 2 variables that will serve as the x-axis and y-axis on your graphs. These are called your independent and dependent variables. Again, remember, these are things that we discussed in the scientific method. Making a line graph. The independent variable is the one that is being changed during your experiment, and it is always placed on the x-axis or the horizontal axis. The dependent variable is your results, or what you observed as a result of the independent variable being changed. The dependent variable is placed on the y-axis or the vertical axis. An easy way to remember this is to ask yourself the questions. What did I know before I did the experiment? Your independent variable. What did I learn by doing the experiment? Your dependent variable. Using the grid below, or what is on your paper, make a line graph using the information in example 1. First, determine the variable to place on the x-axis and which variable to place on the y-axis. Label each axis appropriately. Select each axis, scale each axis appropriately. Title your graph. And plot the points of your graph. It's going to be up to you to plot the points on your graph. Using the grid in your notes, you make a line graph using the information in example 2. Again, determine which variable goes on the horizontal axis and which variable goes on the vertical axis. Make sure to label each axis appropriately. Scale each axis appropriately. Title your graph. And plot the points on the graph. Since this graph is going to have 2 different lines, be sure to label each line. Making a bar graph. Bar graphs are useful in showing comparisons of data collected by counting. A bar graph has 2 axes. a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. Generally, the horizontal axis is labeled and the vertical axis is divided. The data are not related, so the bars do not touch. With the space provided in your notes, please make a bar graph of the following information. In an orchard, the following kilograms of peaches were picked during a 6-year period. Determine which variable to place on each axis. Label each axis. Draw the bars showing the appropriate amounts, and title your graph. Making a circle graph. Circle graphs are used less often in science reporting, but they are often seen in newspapers and magazines. Circle graphs are used less often in science, but they're often seen in newspapers and magazines. A circle graph is a convenient way to show the relative size of the parts that form an entire body of data. You, in your notes, are now going to create your own circle graph given this information. Suppose that in a particular high school, the number of students taking a science class is as follows. 50% are taking biology, 30% are taking chemistry, 10% are taking physics, and 10% are taking some other type of science class. Use the circle below to represent this data in pictorial form. Once you've completed that, complete the analysis questions in your notes.